So good afternoon, everyone. This is Audrey Russo, President and CEO of the Pittsburgh Technology Council. It's Friday, and it's a beautiful day here in Pittsburgh, and I'm very excited about the topic that we're going to talk about today with our guests. But before we do, I want to make sure that everyone realizes that we put you on mute, and we also have a chat, and we're really encouraging you to join us on the chat. We have a great guest here today, someone that I've recently met and very thrilled about all that he brings to the table. I also want to thank Huntington Bank for being our partners throughout all of COVID and even before, for all things that we do in terms of experimental work in media and communications. Jonathan Kirsting's with us today. He's Vice President of Marketing and all things media as well at the Tech Council. He'll be managing the chat as well. So let's just jump right in. I'm pretty excited to have John Barnes with us. I'm going to let him introduce himself. We're going to talk about additive manufacturing today. We're going to talk about Neighborhood 91, and who knows where we get into in terms of the opportunities up and downstream in the additive space. So welcome, John.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
It's great to see you, and it's great that you're here. Why don't you introduce yourself? Tell everyone about your background, who you are, who's John the man?
Right. Well, how much time do we have? No. It's a very long story, a very short period, yeah.
Yeah, once upon a time. You can start wherever you would like.
Raised in a log cabin. Yeah, so I was actually raised in Atlanta, but my mom was a former McKeesport high school teacher. So she was actually born in the Pittsburgh area, and she and my dad moved to Atlanta just before I was born, a long time ago. So ironically, my grandmother's furniture, which came from McKeesport, is now back in Pittsburgh. So if you need some Victorian furniture, I'm your guy. I'm a materials engineer by background, and worked in aerospace and defense for over 25 years. So I've worked on, most of my career was spent on jet engines to stealth aircraft. And then I had an opportunity to go to Australia to work for the National Science Agency there. So I ran their titanium research program, and then created their additive manufacturing program, which we called, we created a facility for industry to come in. And that we called that Lab 22. So it was sort of like our play on Area 51 in Australia. Oh. So we, I always used to joke when I was there with my boss, because additive manufacturing in the mid 2010s, was increasing in popularity. So I said, well, we should just call our program the Additive Manufacturing Program, because as soon as anybody finds out about it, they keep wanting to hear more. And when we used to deal with the Australian embassy crew, after I talked to him, he was bringing his colleague in, and he's like, literally, we're going to present you with the red pill or the blue pill. So you're going to have to make a decision. So we came to Pittsburgh in 2015. I came to work for a company called RTI International. And, then we became Alcoa, then we became Arconic. And I started my firm, the Barnes Global Advisors, in 2017. So we're a bit different than most engineering firms. We're very global. We've had business on 6 different continents. So we're still hunting for some penguins to do some work with in Antarctica, so we can add the 7th. But we're probably got a bit ways to go on that one. For us, our distinction is we're characteristically very experienced. A lot of former working engineers and executives of materials and aerospace companies. But for us, we're always invested in the industry, or as I like to call it, be a part of the fabric of the industry. So we volunteer a lot. Last year, I think we put in over 200 hours of volunteer time at universities or high schools, trying to encourage people to go into STEM related activities. And I'm an adjunct at Carnegie Mellon and also at RMIT University. So I go teach a class at Carnegie Mellon every once in a while. We've had interns from CMU. I'm going to teach a class at Pitt actually here. Well, I'm not teaching the class. I'm just the guest lecturer at Pitt next month. So I have two daughters, 12 and 15. So I live in, even my dog is also female. So I live in a house full of women, and we're very supportive of gender diversity in engineering. That's something that's one of our particular causes. My number two is a woman named Laura Eli. She's great. So beyond that, you know, it's really about additive manufacturing, or 3D printing, some people may know it as. And so that's kind of
Well,
my story in a nutshell.
well, it's a good story. You're a global citizen, and we're glad to have you in Pittsburgh because global matters. And I think let's just jump in and start talking about additive manufacturing. Let's just set, so everyone has, you know, a common understanding of additive.
Yeah, so when we talk about additive, it's different than legacy manufacturing, and that it is an additive process. So we think about the world in terms of layers. So we can conceptualize a part a layer at a time. So imagine it's a bit like using Legos. You know, we don't have to worry about the overall part. We only worry about one layer at a time, and we just go about putting material where we need it, and then we add another layer onto it, and we just kind of go in a stepwise fashion. The corollary is legacy manufacturing is, think of a sculptor where we have a large block of stone or metal or wood, and we carve a shape out of it. And and with that, there's necessarily encumbrances that come with that approach. Characteristically with additive, because we're only think about it at a two-dimensional layer at a time, we can make things that you can't make the other way, or would be so expensive to make the other way that you just don't. And so that's where you see these really kind of bionic designs and very, you know, open latticey type shapes, because those are very amenable for the process that you really wouldn't do with a machining process or a legacy kind of manufacturing process. So that's what's physically different about it. And then how you approach it is a little bit different too. So, you know, I often say for designers, this technology is huge. You know, who knows where it's going to stop giving, because the designer's space just, you know, opened up again to 3 dimensions where they kind of got hemmed into a 2-dimensional space.
So what's the opportunity for us? We're going to talk about Neighborhood 91 in a minute, but talk about the market. What's the market right now in terms of additive? If you could just, do you have any data? Do you have any info that could tell us how vast this is?
Yeah, so additive, I'll say first off, isn't necessarily new. It's about 30 years old, but most people, the 30-year-old portion of it's largely plastics. And so plastics kind of led the revolution. Metals is now maturing. It's kind of coming up to speed, but it's not at the same level of maturation as polymers or plastics are. In general, if manufacturing globally is a $2 trillion industry, so it's very large, and it's growing at about 6% annually. Additive manufacturing is $2 billion, so it's 1%, and it's growing at 30% per year. So if you wanted to get into manufacturing, additive manufacturing is really where the lift is coming at the moment. And it's coming at every aspect of it. It's coming in raw materials, it's coming in design, it's coming in part manufacture, it's coming in you know, final finishes. You know, all aspects are being taken on by different people. And because of this, you know, a lot of people throw the word innovation around a lot, but it's inherently an innovative technology because it does require a lot of inputs from a lot of different people. You really can't get there on your own. No one company drives the complete supply chain. It is a system of interdependencies. Mm-hmm. And that's also where I think it's hard, because you have to have companies that you trust to move forward with. So we talk a lot about supply chain and trust when we go to talk to firms. And but the flip side is when you get that, it's like the definition of a rising tide floats all boats. If I'm doing my job well and you're doing your job well, we both benefit as a result of it. And then there's of course benefits of innovative you know, communities, so to speak. You know, Silicon Valley would be a great example. as we talked about before. People said, oh, the world is flat, we can be anywhere we want. Everybody's going to move out of Silicon Valley because it's expensive and traffic, but traffic's worse and it's more expensive, and it's bigger than it ever has been. So I think that that's the advantage here. And certainly Pittsburgh has some natural advantages because of its legacy and its transition. And so when you look at the supply chain for additive manufacturing, specifically metal additive manufacturing, it exists all around Pittsburgh, actually within about 2 hours. And now we're just trying to shrink it down to a smaller campus and make it more efficient.
All right, so we'll talk about that in a second. But what has there been in terms of the market? Has there been a change in demand or anything in COVID during these last 6 months that you've seen any changes in this space?
Yeah, there are. And you reminded me of the other aspect, which I forgot to talk about, which is kind of the people aspect of it. So people really like 3D printing. And I think one of the reasons they like about it is it's very tangible. So I have, both of my kids here in Quaker Valley, their schools have 3D printers, so that they can literally go from designing something on a screen and physically go watch it get made. It's personal now. It's not something that arrives in a box from some unknown land. So then all of a sudden you're now intimately involved with it. You can kind of connect back and say, oh, well, maybe I wanted to do this, or maybe it should do that. And so that iteration process, happens. The thing I like to talk about frequently is at QV, there were 2 4th graders, and they had a class assignment for their innovation class, and they used 3D printing as the example of it. And so they went from a description, they wrote it down as you do, and good engineering principles. And then they went about making a prototype of a metal 3D printer using a cardboard box and some associated stuff. And, first I was shocked because I was like when I was in 4th grade, coloring with colored pencils was a big deal. I didn't know what innovation was, to, progressing now down to something like a manufacturing technology like but they don't think about it as a manufacturing technology. It's a progression from, I can think of something, I can make something.
And I think that we're not too far off where everyone will have one. Everyone will have one in their own home.
There's certainly that opportunity, and it has kind of broken it down to, there's plenty of free tools now to design stuff with. If you can design something, you can have it made. You don't even have to have it in your house. There's places to go online. Proto Labs will guarantee that it'll be made in 24 hours if that's what you want. So that's what's hugely exciting about this, because I've worked in kind of materials and manufacturing all my career. And we went through this phase where manufacturing was kind of looked down on. Certainly growing up in Atlanta, nobody encouraged me to be an engineer. My high school, it was go be a doctor, go be a lawyer. And I was the weird kid that liked math and science. But now it's like, okay, how do we retain the coolness of it and maybe not tell them that it's manufacturing, so that we keep the interest going. And that has kind of played into, all of a sudden we're involved in this COVID thing. The other thing I usually tell people is that additive was made since the internet. So it's always been a very connected technology. It's never known silos, if you will, that while there's areas that are good at it, they've always been connected and they always communicate really well. So when COVID came along, there was this opportunity to go make things. And so, I've told people that, maybe it's not the best way of making something, but when you have nothing, an expensive something is better than nothing. And I think that's where it shares a little bit with the defense world. Or any remote kind of austere environment. So I had a colleague who I worked with at Lockheed. He was a Bradley vehicle commander in Gulf War I, and he went into battle without his gun being operable for one of basically a 10-cent part. And so he's like, if I could have printed a handful of crappy, $20 parts, I would have felt a whole lot better. Obviously he survived, it wasn't needed, but he felt a little foolish going in at full speed, with just that kind of yelling into the wind. And with COVID, we saw similar things, which was, but better, because people were coming together to solve this problem, and international boundaries weren't really an issue any longer. We could have Zoom calls, we could have, so we ourselves, we were involved with the VA through some mutual connections to talk about what they needed in the hospital. And so we went through a very concurrent design activity with them for a reusable N95 mask for the surgical theater. And so I've still never met Dr. Ripley. She lives in Seattle. We would be on Zoom calls frequently, and her team would transfer, we would produce CAD files. Her team would comment on the CAD files. We would then go to a third place to have them made, printed, and then they would get shipped there and here and everywhere else. So we'd have, physical, things to kind of get that look and touch, and they could do trials with it. Similarly, in Pittsburgh, there were initiatives that just came together at will, between University of Pittsburgh, X1, ANSYS, UPMC. So UPMC was saying, hey, it would be great if we had this. So then it was like thinking the problem differently. Like, what problem are we solving? Okay, you don't have a filter. Okay, well, what does a filter do? So we kind of went back, we broke it down and said, okay, it would be great if this filter could be reused. Drop it in boiling water, put it in an autoclave. It survives that process, and you keep reusing it, because right now the filter is otherwise very cheap, but we can't get it. So the idea of reusing a filter became very important. And so that was where, Pittsburgh was like right there. It was connected. It was, people were willing to do it, but it was a microcosm of what was happening all over the world. And Pittsburgh was connected to the VA. We were connected to the U.S. Army's Chem Bio Center that does the testing for the filters. WabTech, was involved. Why is a train company involved in this? Well, right. They do filtration systems, but right. for bigger things. So we came up with some things that we issued. We put a patent right. in on of a different way of thinking about a filtration problem.
So, are there any particular assets in our region that makes this a compelling vision for Neighborhood 91? And we'll jump into that in a minute, but are there assets? I know that you've said that you talk to people all the time around the world, and when talk about what additive manufacturing and trying to build a cluster here, that people have said, yeah, makes sense, no surprise. Yeah.
So with Neighborhood 91, I mean, that came out of the airport started this innovation campus idea, and it was intentionally an innovation campus. Right. But specifically, they were trying to put some meat on the bone. My prior CEO, Don Hickton, brought me into a conversation with Christina Casadas at the airport. And, fortunately for me, like those two, we were all like peas in a pod. I just sat there and like, yeah, these are some cool people to be involved with. So I just threw out a notion, because I had looked at it and I said, Pittsburgh, again, if you draw that 2-hour radius around Pittsburgh, everything you need exists, but none of them are talking to each other.
Right.
So I said, what if we brought that into a 200-acre campus, but then we amplify it we invite the world to come here, not just worry about, Western PA. So that's kind of how it took off. But whenever we go, it doesn't matter who we talk to or wherever we are, if we're in Germany or if we're in Texas, and we say that we're doing this production campus, and people say it's in Pittsburgh, I never have to explain why it's in Pittsburgh. Everybody's just like, yeah, that makes total sense. You guys do manufacturing, you do metals. It's, Pittsburgh's known to be an innovative place. That's its reputation.
Well, particularly in the material space.
Well, in the material space, but I think just in terms of a transformative city, like everybody knows Pittsburgh, the story of steel, but I will say, whether we believe it or not, everybody believes that Pittsburgh has evolved. Other cities have not. And so when people compare us to Sheffield a lot, but I will say we're bit to be known a bit more successful version of Sheffield, because we're not still trying to only do metals.
So there are a couple of questions out there. Can we jump to a few of them, Jonathan?
Absolutely. Some great questions here. Let's start with Amy Kaminsky. She wants to know, are there opportunities with Neighborhood 91 to tap into the circular economy, like recycling single-use plastics and things like that, turn them into new products?
I think that the answer is definitely yes. And so one of the things that we've invested with infrastructure wise on Neighborhood 91 is argon recycling and recapture and recycling. So that's the beginning of that circular piece. So basically, once we bring in argon to the campus, we're only going to, let's say, top it up about 5% every year. So, imagine all the energy that's taken to take argon out of the air that we breathe, condense it down, truck it around, we're eliminating all of that. So we're just going to have a continuous loop of argon running through the campus. In terms of additives role in sustainability and the circular kind of economy, if you will, there are companies that are more involved in that than others. And so there's a company that's actually has a facility here in Pittsburgh. They're almost too close to Neighborhood 91, but we're going to try to encourage them to put their production campus. But they're trying to take scrap from other processes and turn it into metal powder that can be used in additive manufacturing.
That's cool.
So they're most recently, there's a new initiative, I forget the actual name of it, but it's a specific additive manufacturing circular kind of sustainability group it's a volunteer group, but trying to push forward some of these initiatives. And so I think that there's many aspects of the sustainability part of it. So making lighter weight parts can be very effective in that sustainability argument, because then you're going to burn less fuel. Electric cars are heavy because they have batteries and electric motors, which are much more heavy compared to the combustion engines. But they've not been in cars, except for the very early cars, which were electric, but nobody seems to want to recognize that. But those things all are going to be much more reliant on lightweighting to make them more efficient. So from the single-use plastics and making more use of those plastics, so I think we're just scratching the surface of what's possible on that part of the equation. So I think if we have the production campus here, those are going to be, I don't want to say secondary benefits, but that's I think probably the best description I could say.
Jonathan, keep going.
Yeah. How about a master plan for the campus? Is it mixed use zoning, or will it be just strictly industrial?
The idea is that it'll be a mixed use, and that it will have a town center. When it's at its full capacity, it will have people will be making things. There'll be office buildings, design bureaus, places to go have lunch.
I say, will they have additive food at the cafes? Like
hopefully not. No. Maybe.
And how critical is 5G infrastructure for the future of manufacturing and for like Neighborhood 91?
Honestly, I have no idea how to answer that question. I have no idea, honestly.
No idea. Okay, well, that's your homework assignment.
Yeah, find
5G.
You need to find that out. Okay, because that's your homework assignment.
It sounds better than 4G.
It does.
Okay, never mind. You need a little bit more homework on that, Sean. So I think we're finished with the question. So I wanna jump in. Are there any places like Neighborhood 91 around the world?
No, there are a lot of campuses that focus on innovation, more at the basic level, and let's say the research and applied research level. There's plenty of campuses for that. But there are no production oriented campuses, because it's not been mature enough for it, and it requires a fairly decent scale to carry off.
So what about jobs? What will it look like in the perfect world if as this starts to come together? Where do you see the job opportunities, and what does it look like for up and down the supply chain?
Well, I think we've again just begun to scratch the surface on that one. So I think from the most immediate part, it's easy to look at the engineer's role, and we're not talking about eliminating an engineers. We're talking about giving them new skills so that they can adapt this. And And then you think about from the engineers to the managers and supervisors. I mean, they have to have awareness. To the technicians who are going to operate these machines, well, they're obviously going to be a little bit more intimate with it than other people. Then you get into people who maintain the machines and the systems that support it. So, you know, we've had some early discussions with, like, you know, the steam fitters, and, you know, I had to get smart on what steam fitters do. And it wasn't not something that I've had the opportunity to run across previously. And I looked at it and I said, well, almost everything they do has some impact in making a facility, you know, constructing a facility and maintaining a facility or maintaining equipment that has additive equipment in it. So I think there's indirect benefits and there's direct benefits. But in no case am I seeing something where you're eliminating one thing and creating something entirely new. It's simply building upon the base that's already there. It's about adding skills more than anything else.
Well, I mean, I think the thing that I hope everyone takes away from this is the fact that the interdependency build communities, and it's not just in additive, it's in everything. You set the table by saying Silicon Valley, right? People still live there, their cost is high, et cetera, highly concentrated. It's because of those interdependencies that it requires. And this is a great example of the importance of that for Pittsburgh as we continue to evolve. I also like the fact that you're advocating, that you're saying that it's natural when you talk to people, when you say doing this, that it doesn't seem like it's a far stretch in terms of the optics of the people that you connect with. So what's the future? We're gonna probably hear more about Neighborhood 91 in the next month or so, right?
Certainly, that's the goal. I think we're powering through the painful phase of figuring out how to do construction and all of those things. But I would expect to hear a lot more more frequently about Neighborhood 91. We're set to announce our anchor tenant here very, very shortly. And yeah, so hopefully we've been doing a lot of work kind of behind the scenes to establish some connections with other, let's say, like-minded organizations around the world, but also with companies that want to be here. And with that, let's face it, there's an inherent difficulty when you create something that's here, but you have an existing industry that's here. One of the things is, what's the model for that existing industry to get the benefit as well? You know, but let's make it fair. Some people are making investments being on the campus, but they're going to need some of this infrastructure that exists outside the airport corridor. So we're trying to work a win-win situation for that as well.
And really, when you think about it in terms of economic development, it's really the gift that keeps on giving. If Neighborhood 91 really becomes successful, the spillover effect to that area of Allegheny County and beyond is quite powerful.
It is, and that's, you know, a lot of the impetus came out of University of Pittsburgh with some work that they had done with the Brookings Institute, and it's that notion around advanced manufacturing keeps giving back to the community that it sits in, unlike, you know, some other businesses or industries that you could invest in. And so it sounds corny, but I always like to think of it as it's 200 acres of opportunity. I mean, we've not written the last chapter of the book. We don't even know what the last chapter of the book looks like. But we're very excited about the introduction in chapter 2. You know, that's where we're focused at the moment. But it's a little bit of, we can write our own, we can create our own journey here. This hasn't been done before. So, you know, it's ours to define. If you look at similar constructs, though, again, Pittsburgh's the region is actually well situated. So in Germany, they're very, very good at doing this, but they set up an infrastructure to start from the universities and plug them into the businesses, so that there's this constant pipeline of, you know, new stuff. And we've got I would say, a very miniature model of that. We've got most locally Carnegie Mellon and Pitt, but you know, I'm looking with my kids, if I draw a radius of 4 hours around Pittsburgh that they could go to universities, you get some pretty top-notch institutions in there. And that's what it's, you know, the workforce thing is huge, you know, and this is underestimated for engineers like myself, but, you know, there's companies out there that have recs open for 50 additive manufacturing roles that they can't fill. So if we have the people, that gives us another reason why it's here. You can put machines anywhere.
Right. So as a last question, because we're coming up to our half hour, Rebecca Mink is saying, so as a female with a mechanical engineer background, how can I apply for jobs? Well, just stay tuned. I think that's really the answer. Stay tuned, because there will be announcements and about, you know, you'll hear more over the next quarter about
I would
Neighborhood
say,
91.
You know, look to join the Women in 3D Printing Pittsburgh chapter.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And we will find that link and share that. So there's the 3D Pittsburgh chapter.
Yeah, Women in 3D Printing is an international organization, and there's a Pittsburgh chapter.
Well, that is absolutely great to know. Okay. Well, I can't thank you enough, John. And I think if people want to reach out to you, they can find you on LinkedIn, I'm sure. John
Yes.
Barnes, B-A-R-N-E-S. And I'm very excited that you've been participating in this project. We're looking forward to lots of partnerships with Neighborhood 91. And thank you for setting the table for us in terms of additive manufacturing and the opportunities and how the world sees Pittsburgh in terms of this space. So I want to thank you. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, everyone. Have a fabulous weekend. We've got a great lineup next week. And Jonathan, do you remember who kicks off on Monday? Because we're like in our 130th.
I have not confirmed that with BK yet, but I know we do have the CEO of Aurora stopping by midweek, which is
Nice. Okay, that's nice.
Still in formation, but we're
Monday is exciting. We have Matthew Marolda. He is with Tulco, and that's Thomas Tull's company. So stay tuned. We're going to have. I forgot about that. We're moving so fast here, and we're trying to provide all the information that people need to keep tethered to the community. As John Barnes said, it's all about interdependency.
Exactly. Good stuff.
And we have Maven Machines on Tuesday. Okay, everyone. Thank you. Have a great weekend. Thanks, John.
Bye.
Oh my God, there's a question.